Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about a really interesting topic, something called planned obsolescence. And maybe you haven't heard that term before, but I'm sure you've felt it, or are even feeling it right now on your phone or tablet or computer that you're watching this on. So the big question is it a conspiracy or is it all in our heads? So first of all, we have to make a distinction between planned obsolescence and perceived obsolescence. Planned obsolescence is when something is literally made to fail within a certain period of time. And perceived obsolescence is when something seems like it died before it should have. Now, my favorite example of these two things are light bulbs and clothing. The former has a really dank example, something called the Phoebus Cartel, which is a bunch of corporations that got together in Geneva in 1925 and pretty much made a deal with each other so they all make light bulbs that only last about 1,000 hours, which really made sense for them at the time because the whole electricity thing was just popping off. And they were like, why should we make high quality light bulbs if people are going to keep buying them all the time? Why not just make a bunch of crappy light bulbs that people will buy regularly? Makes sense, right? So the standard, like I said, is 1,000 hours. And before that, the standard was 2,500 hours. So they cut it by 60%, which is pretty crazy, right? Now, something that you should Google that I've heard, but I don't know if it's true, is that it's not necessarily the number of hours that the light bulb is on, which determines its life cycle, but the number of times that you turn it on and off. Because the sudden temperature changes is what ruins the material. And that's still true today. That's the standard that we still have, is the 1,000-hour standard for light bulbs. Now, on the other hand, we have perceived obsolescence. And like I said, my favorite example is clothing. You can buy a pair of Nikes or a hoodie or something and wear it for a couple of years. And then after that, it'll just seem old and out of style. Why is that? It doesn't have any holes in it, you can still wear it, but for some reason it just seems like it's not fashionable anymore. Why is that? So the question is, are the retailers speeding along the whole fashion thing just to sell more clothing? Maybe we've heard the term fast fashion. It's the idea that a lot of clothing retailers have where they just pump new things out on the shelf every couple of weeks. And actually there was a problem for a bunch of retailers when the lockdown happened because there weren't any physical stores for people to go to. And that's what their whole business model was based on, for you to come in every couple of weeks or couple of months and buy a new shirt, buy some new pants, something like that. So when the lockdown happened, they had a tough time. So what about everyday things like cars, phones, and household appliances? I'm sure you've heard some boomers say, they just don't make them like they used to. And that's probably true. Back in the day, they really made things to last. But what about now? We kind of have this consumer throwaway culture, which is fueled by two things. On the one hand, you always want something new, something better, right? So when just one button on your microwave stops working, you throw it out and buy a new one instead of getting that fixed. Your TV plug or something stopped working, you don't get it fixed, you go buy a new TV, just put it on my Visa. So, whose fault really is that? Is it our fault for wanting to consume more? Or is it like the credit card company's fault that constantly give us credit and incentive to buy something new? Another great example, in my opinion, is Batterygate. I'm sure you've heard this or even experienced this if you have an iPhone. So a few years ago, people started noticing that older model iPhones started slowing down when newer iPhones came out. And at first Apple tried denying this, but eventually they rolled back and said, yes, it's true. Now, why is this happening? So the thing with batteries is they lose their capacity over time. And the thing with software is it always needs better hardware to run on. So the paradox was you could either have an old iPhone running at the same speed, but it would overheat and lose battery life faster, or you can have it run slower with the same battery life. What would you choose? Well, Apple chose the latter and didn't tell you about it, and that was the problem. And that's why they had to pay a $113 million fine eventually. And actually, a life hack is if you switch your location to France, your phone will run like it did before. It will overheat and lose battery life if it's an older model, but it will still run quickly because France outlawed this practice. Oh, and by the way, if you have an iPhone and you want to check how much battery capacity it still has left, go to Settings, Battery Health. And that percentage will tell you the maximum capacity that your battery will still hold. So in my opinion, this comes down to a trade-off between price and quality. I'm sure they could design a smartphone that'll last for 10 years without any problems, but it'll cost what, like $5,000? Are you gonna wanna pay $5,000 for a phone that you're not gonna want in a few years? Because I know I won't. I upgrade my phone every 3 years or so. So that's really the trade-off. But on the other hand, a washing machine or a fridge isn't like a smartphone. If I buy a washing machine or a fridge, I want it to last for 20 years because I doubt that there's going to be a brand new fridge with extreme cooling capabilities that I'm going to want in 5 years, right? Now, you may be wondering, why aren't we mentioning Swiss watches? What happened to Rolex or Patek Philippe? Well, the thing is, those things are almost like investments. They don't really lose that much value over time, first of all. Second of all, you're really paying for the brand and the image, right? When you're buying a Rolex or a Swiss watch. And the third thing is that mechanical watches engineering really hasn't changed that much over the past 100 years. It's not like a smartphone where the processor keeps getting smaller, right? The gears are still gears. They're not gonna change in any way, right? So, is there a cure for the chronic dissatisfaction for the things that are not as good as they used to be? That's for you to decide. Another unfortunate side effect of all this consumerism is the effect that we're having on the environment. This constant buying and throwing away and buying and throwing away of plastic and other goods are really messing up the oceans, which I'm sure you've heard of by now. Shop till you drop. Alright guys, so thanks for watching this video. If you have any thoughts, leave them down in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and stay geekly, my friends.